Well, that didn't take long. Notre Dame has already figured out a solution at left tackle to replace Charles Jagusah, plus why one wide receiver's emergence could change the dynamic of the entire offense. That's next on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Wednesday, August 7th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And as always, you can watch the show on YouTube, or you can listen wherever it is that you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, this is your reminder to please like that video, subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Okay, we have a lot to get into today. First off, we got a couple of very important updates about the Notre Dame offense coming out of camp that I'm going to break down. And then in segment 3, I have an awesome story that I'm excited to share with you about Yared Nuguse, the Notre Dame graduate who won a bronze medal in the 1,500-meter final at the Olympics on Tuesday. Huge congrats to him, and when you find out the reason he started running in the first place, you're going to be blown away. So stick around for that in segment 3. But the most important news we've got to discuss is that it appears offensive line coach Joe Rudolph has already found a replacement for Charles Jagusah at the left tackle spot following Charles Jagusah's season-ending injury. And it's going to be Tosh Baker. If you listen to yesterday's episode, you know that this is the route I expected them to take, and it is the route that I would have chosen myself. Tosh Baker is a fifth-year senior. He was Joe Alt's backup at left tackle for the last couple of years, and he started a few games in the past. Sure, I will say he starts at left tackle back in 2021. Did not go great, but he wasn't ready to be starting in that spot anyway. The only reason why he was in there is because two guys ahead of him got hurt, but then he also started at right tackle in the Sun Bowl at the end of last season, so he has experience. He's been around for a long time. He's a really big-time competitor, and I think that he was the most logical option for Notre Dame to replace Charles Jagusah. I think it's even more important to have an experienced guy in there when you consider who Notre Dame is going to be dealing with in the season opener. They're going to be on the road, playing in a very hostile environment in front of like 110,000 people, going up against one of the better front sevens in all of college football, and I think that played a big part in why Notre Dame went with Tosh Baker, at least at this point. Joe Rudolph made it clear to the media following Tuesday's practice that Tosh is going to make that move from right tackle to left, and it's his job to lose now. It doesn't even seem like there's going to be much of a competition for that spot throughout camp. Here's what Rudolph had to say about it. Quote, Tosh has started games at both right and left. His understanding is outstanding. His competitive level and his care level is off the charts. He started at left before. He started at right before. Didn't miss a beat. He stepped right in and was himself, end quote. Rudolph made these comments recently, so it seems like ever since Jagusah went down, Tosh Baker was plugged in, and he really has been going, and he's been competing well at that spot, and it doesn't seem like he's really struggled going back from right tackle to left tackle, at least at this point. And look, I think we all understand that Tosh has his limitations. We've seen that on display when he's taken the field before and in practice. There's a reason why Joe Alt beat him out as a younger player, and now Emil Wagner was able to do the same this offseason. It's because they outplayed Tosh Baker. I think we all get that. But Tosh has great size. He's been around long. He's got great length. And the fact that Joe Rudolph immediately slotted him in there as a starting left tackle without any real hesitation, I think should tell you how much Rudolph trusts him over the alternative options. I wondered if Rudolph might be willing to move Wagner from right tackle to left tackle just because Emil Wagner's a little bit more mobile. He's got better feet. He's a little bit lighter on his feet. But I also felt like Emil Wagner needed to take all those reps at one position because he's never started a game before in his college career. Notre Dame is going to ask him to be the starting right tackle in that season opener. So I didn't think it would be a good idea to move him from right to left, and it seems like Coach Rudolph agreed. But he also made an interesting point that I did not expect, and he said that Wagner is a better right tackle, which I think goes against a lot of what some people in the media thought and some of the fans thought as well. They thought he'd be better suited at left. That does not appear to be the case. Rudolph believes that Wagner's more comfortable on the right side. And he also said that Tosh Baker is a little bit more comfortable on the left side, which might explain why Emil Wagner was better than him for the right tackle spot. Again, I understand that this might come as a surprise to some fans, but I'm going to trust the coach with decades of experience coaching the offensive line. I do believe that it's fair to question coaches' decisions sometimes, but in this case, I don't think we on the outside have any legitimate ground to question that kind of decision because Rudolph sees these guys every day in practice. He's been around for a couple years now. He knows these guys. He knows their strengths. He knows their weaknesses, and it's clear that he believes that Tosh Baker is better suited at left tackle than Emil Wagner, and that is why he's got Tosh at left and Emil Wagner at right tackle. I also understand why some fans wanted to let the younger guys have a shot. I talked about that in yesterday's episode as well. I thought maybe Notre Dame would move Sullivan Absher from left guard back to tackle, although he's only going to be a redshirt freshman this season. I thought they might give Gerby Lambert or Anthony Knapp a shot at left tackle. Both of those guys are true freshmen, but it just doesn't make sense right now, especially when you consider what Notre Dame is going to have to do in the season opener. Like, there is a good chance that every single one of those guys I just mentioned, Absher, Lambert, and Knapp, they might each have a higher ceiling than Tosh Baker. That could be true. But they definitely have a lower floor than Tosh Baker at this point in their careers, and that floor could be on full display if any one of those guys made their first career start at left tackle on the road against Texas A&M. Nick Scorton, the defensive end on Texas A&M, who is probably going to be a first-round pick in this year's NFL draft, would eat any single one of those guys alive. And there's a good chance that he dominates Tosh Baker because that's how good of a player Nick Scorton is. But still, I at least would trust Tosh Baker more than those other guys in that spot, with at least 5 years of experience compared to one for those other guys. Running backs coach Dylan McCullough made a similar point when he was talking about his freshman running backs. He said you can't commit coaching malpractice by throwing freshmen out there on that type of stage in that kind of environment against a Mike Elko defense when they're just not ready. I think the same could be said about the freshman tackles. That would be an extremely difficult task for any single one of those guys, and especially for Sullivan Absher because he's been playing guard lately. So then to move him back to left tackle, it just seemed like a lot. Plus Lambert, he's only been around the team for a couple months now. That didn't really make sense either. And Anthony Knapp, even though he's exceeded all the expectations to this point in his career, he still has a long way to go. So this is what Notre Dame is going to go with. I thought maybe they could move Billy Schrouth from right guard to left tackle. I never really seriously considered that, and it doesn't seem like Rudolph considered that either. I think the way he looks at it is, quote, you don't weaken one thing to help another. Totally agree with that. I think for all the concerns that I have about the offensive line as a whole, like as a five-man unit, the staff seems very confident in the interior with whatever they choose at the left guard spot, whether it be Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler, and then at center, they've got Ashton Craig, who's got that spot locked up, and then Billy Schrouth is the right guard spot locked up. They feel very good about those three. So if they wanted to move Billy Schrouth over, then that makes that group a little bit worse, and it might make the entire unit a little bit worse in turn. So they don't want to mess it up if it's a strength, and they look at the interior as a strength right now, and we're going to figure out if the tackles are as bad as they could be or as some fear that they might be. I also think it's a legitimate concern. I know that I caught some flack for being a little bit negative when I was talking about Jagusah's injury, but hey, man, some teams have big weaknesses. I'm a little bit worried that the offensive line could be a big weakness, but I am totally open to the idea that I could be completely wrong about this group. Maybe they're way better than I expect they could be, and that would be awesome. I'm not a person who feels the need that I don't want to be right just for the sake of being right. I would love for the Notre Dame offensive line to exceed all my expectations because if that is the case, then this team is going to be really, really good and can make a serious run in the college football playoff. I just look at how the staff talked about Jagusah, what his potential could be at the left tackle spot, and I feel like it's a pretty significant drop-off from Jagusah to Tosh Baker at left tackle. But hey, I could be proven wrong. And I always felt like even though Jagusah is much better than Tosh Baker, this was always going to be the most logical option. So I am not at all surprised that this is what Notre Dame decided to do. I thought they might entertain a position battle, even if it was just for a short period of time, but that is not the case. And I think that should tell you just how far ahead Tosh Baker is compared to these other guys. If there is a position battle, it might occur as the season goes along. The staff trusts Baker now, but if he goes out there and he struggles over the first few games, I could see the staff making a move. This is definitely going to be something that we continue to monitor the rest of the way. But I think as we sit here today, as based on everything that we know about the guys in that room, this was the right move to make. If that changes as the season goes along, so be it. It happened in 2021. It took Notre Dame a long time to figure out the five best guys in the offensive line. But once they figured it out, They were rolling there at the end of the season. The offense was moving the ball, but it just took a long time to get there. Notre Dame cannot afford to have that happen again this season, so I just have to hope that Tosh Baker seizes this opportunity. I give him a ton of credit for sticking around as a graduate senior when he could have just left after spring practice when it was clear that Emil Wagner had beaten him out. He didn't do that. He wanted to stick around. He wanted to fight. And now here he is. Here it is, the opportunity that he's been waiting for his entire career. Now he just has to seize it, go out there, and make some plays. And I think we're all rooting for Tosh Baker to have an incredible season in his last go-round with the Irish. All right, coming up next, one of the most impressive players at camp so far is one who I did not expect, but he could change the dynamic of the entire receiver room and the Irish offense. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Whether you've been planning to go to a game for weeks or if you're feeling spontaneous and you want to hit up the nearby ballpark, Gametime is the perfect place for you. I'm actually going to the Dodgers game tonight, all thanks to Gametime. Woke up, I was like, wow, the Phillies are in town? Dodgers, Phillies, count me in. All thanks to Gametime. It is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy, but my favorite thing about Gametime personally is the pricing shows your total costs up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So for all the bad news that's been swirling around the Notre Dame football program these last few days with Charles Jagusah's injury and the whole Deuce night, is he going to decommit? What's his plan? What is he doing? The one bit of positive news is that Beaux Collins, the transfer wide receiver from Clemson, has been showing out ever since he got to Notre Dame, and that is a big, big deal, not only for the wide receiver room, but the offense as a whole, because as much as we like the depth of that wide receiver room, you need at least 1 or 2 alphas, some guys who you can count on to make a big play in the biggest moments, and Notre Dame might have 2 of those in Beaux Collins and Jane Greathouse. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but the reports on Beaux Collins have been really, really exciting. So he wasn't able to participate in spring practice, obviously, because he was still technically a student at Clemson. He was finishing up his last few credits he needed to graduate, but he has been one of the stars of the summer and of camp so far. He's very twitchy and has a command of the offense, which is pretty surprising considering he hasn't really been with the team that long. Like, he was still around the program. I believe he was taking his last few classes online, so he was still in South Bend, but he couldn't be out there on the practice field. But it seems like he has a grasp of what Mike Denbrock has been teaching, and he's been a bit of a leader, which is, again, a bit of a surprise considering he just hasn't really been around that long. But Notre Dame needs him because this guy has played a lot of college football. He also made an appearance on Bruce Feldman's Freak List on Tuesday that Bruce Feldman puts out every season. And if you're unfamiliar, Feldman is a college football writer for The Athletic. And every single year he comes out with this big feature article about the 100 most physically gifted and explosive players in all of college football. Highly encourage you to read it if you are a fan of college football, because it just shows you how insanely gifted, explosive, strong, whatever adjective you want to use, some of these guys are in college football. And Riley Mills and Beaux Collins were the 2 Notre Dame guys who cracked that top 100 this year. And this is what Feldman had to say about Beaux Collins. Quote, "The former Clemson receiver who had 91 catches for 1,290 yards and 11 TDs in 32 games with the Tigers should add some juice to the Irish receiving core. The 6'3", 208-pounder from Los Angeles put up some dazzling numbers during the training program this offseason. Vertical jumping 41.5 inches and broad jumping 10/11.5. End quote. Now, to some, I understand that being mentioned on some college football writers' freak list might not mean all that much. But for context here, Bruce Feldman is extremely dialed in with all of the major staffs in college football. Whenever it comes to the coaching carousel, who's going to make what move, I don't really believe it until Bruce Feldman puts it out there. And Bruce gets his information from the coaches directly all around the country. So this means that Lauren Landau or someone else who's high up on Notre Dame's strength staff singled out Beaux Collins as well as Riley Mills and Howard Cross and raved about them to Bruce Feldman, and that is how Beaux Collins ended up on that list. So that tells me that Beaux Collins was one of the standouts in the summer training program, and So much so that the coaching staff felt compelled to tell everyone they could about what he's been able to do since he joined the team. Coaching staff is very high on Collins. I think you can tell based off what whoever coach passed this information along to Bruce Feldman, but also Marcus Freeman has singled him out a couple times in one of his post-practice pressers. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you've been listening to this every day, throughout the offseason, you'll know that I wasn't quite as high on Beaux Collins as some people going into this season. That's not to say I didn't think he was a take for Notre Dame. I was like, oh, this is good. Notre Dame needed a veteran wide receiver after just the lack of production that the wide receiver room has put out these past couple of years. And I was like, okay, this is a good ad, but I never looked at him as like an automatic starter. I looked at Beaux Collins as a guy who would compete for a starting job and would definitely be a part of the rotation. Last year, Beaux Collins had 38 catches for 510 yards and 3 touchdowns, which are pretty modest numbers. And then you take into account the fact that his best game of the season was against Charleston Southern when he put up 7 catches for 137 yards and a touchdown. Those numbers for the season look even worse. His second best game of the last season was against Georgia Tech when he had 5 receptions, 65 yards, and a TD. That's still better than what a lot of Notre Dame wide receivers have been putting out there in recent years, but still, I didn't think that would immediately translate to Notre Dame, and then he would just be much better off. He also had 5 drops last season, including one against Notre Dame that literally bounced off his chest into the hands of Xavier Watson. There's a big reason why Notre Dame was even in that game, because they could not move the ball on offense, but Xavier Watson was able to take it down to the 1. Notre Dame was able to score and keep it close, even though the offense just was not moving the ball at all in that game. So these are all the things that I was considering going into the year, but now that we have some time to think about it and we consider what Clemson's offense has been these past couple of years, it hasn't been great. I think that's fair to say. It was not good a couple of years ago with DJ Uiagalelei. Cade Klubnik has not been the quarterback that a lot of people thought he'd be since he took over as the starter for Clemson. So it's very possible that a big reason why Beaux Collins has not been able to produce as much at Clemson as much as people expected, has more to do with the quarterbacks and the offensive coordinator than it does with him. So at this point, it seems like Collins has shown enough that you can basically write him down as a starter in Penn, which is not something I expected to say, at least at this point in preseason camp. But that appears to be the case. And Jaden Greathouse is the other guy who can just pencil in as the starter right now. But in Penn, I think Collins is going to be on the field or the boundary, probably the boundary. We know Greathouse is going to be the starter in the slot. And then as for that third receiver spot, I think it's anyone's guess. I think it's going to be Jane Thomas. It could be Chris Mitchell, the transfer from Florida International. Jane Harrison, the transfer from Marshall, has been really good, but he's more of a true slot receiver. They've been giving Jordan Faison some reps at field. There's other options for Notre Dame at that position, but I think that when Notre Dame takes the field, you are going to see Beaux Collins and Jaden Greathouse, and that is very, very good. And I understand that there's a lot of you who are cautiously optimistic about the receiving core, and I totally get it, man. They have let us down many times in the past, but if a guy like Collins, who has already played 3 years of big-time college football, someone who has freakish athletic ability, and if he looks poised to have the best year of his career, that totally changes the game for the Notre Dame wide receiver room and the offense, because now you have 2 guys in there who you know are capable, and then you can rotate all these other guys who also have been playing well, guys like Jaden Harrison, guys like Chris Mitchell. You want to get a veteran like Deion Colsey in the mix. Like, they can come in when they need to. But if Beaux Collins and Jaden Greathouse are bringing it on every single play and they're able to make plays even against quality defensive backs or even if there's a guy on them, like, it's just something that Notre Dame has not had in so long. It has been a missing ingredient for the offense in a really long time. And I thought Jaden Greathouse would be the only one this season with that kind of capability. But now if you had Beaux Collins, it just changes things for the entire offense. And I think that it's something that Notre Dame fans should really get excited about. Again, it's still early in camp. Still got a few more weeks left. I need to see it to fully believe it when Notre Dame takes the field against Texas A&M. But I feel like this is a very, very encouraging development, because when you added those 3 guys, you needed all of them to hit. Mitchell, Collins, and Harrison. It looks like Mitchell and Harrison are going to hit in their respective roles, and Beaux Collins might be beyond a hit, which is saying a lot. And I understand that it's early, but this is what I'm hearing, and I think this is what the coaching staff has been telling us as well, if you read the tea leaves. And I am very, very excited about what Beaux Collins is going to bring to this offense, because it's been a long time since Notre Dame had wide receivers that they could count on. Okay, coming up next, a Notre Dame alum won the bronze medal in the 1,500-meter final at the Olympics on Tuesday, which is an unbelievable accomplishment, but the journey to how he got there is even more improbable. So in case you haven't been following the Olympics, the men's 1,500-meter final was one of the most thrilling events of the entire Olympics to date. Cole Hocker of the United States scored one of the biggest upsets in Olympic running history when he beat out the heavy favorites down the stretch to win. But Yared Nuguse, the Notre Dame graduate, almost pulled off one of the biggest upsets in the history of the Olympic Games when he turned on the jets in the last 100 meters and went from 5th to 3rd and was just 1/100th of a second away from coming in second. The Goose, as he's referred to because of his last name, Nuguse, got loose, and it was absolutely thrilling to watch. I encourage you to go check it out if you have not seen it yet. I was literally on my feet yelling at the TV. That's just how excited I was. Obviously, I was rooting for Yared Nuguse because not only did he go to Notre Dame, we also went to the same high school. And if it wasn't for one person, our high school PE teacher, Mick Motley, then Nuguse would never have even ran competitively, let alone become an Olympic medalist. So let me explain. And if you know a little bit about Nuguse's journey, if you heard the story before, I'm sorry, but bear with me. I think it's just so incredible. So let's go back in time. So Nuguse is from Louisville, Kentucky, like myself, and we both went to DuPont Manual High School. I graduated from Manual in 2014, and Nuguse graduated in 2017. So when I was a senior, he was a freshman. So for some context here, Manual is technically a public school, but it's a magnet school, so everyone has to apply to get in, but it's still a public school. And because it's a public school, every freshman in the public county system is required to take 1 semester of physical education and 1 semester of health when they're a freshman. The PE teacher was a guy named Mick Motley, or Coach Motley as he's often referred to as, because he was at one point the head coach at Manual a long time ago, and then he was assistant football coach for decades. He was a coach there, I think, my freshman year, and then he retired because his son Mason was going to be the starting quarterback, and he did not want to be a coach while his son was a quarterback. Mason was in my class, great friend of mine back then, and he was my quarterback. So I know the Motleys really well. Well, when Coach Motley would have the freshmen run the mile, he would have them run to the nearby McDonald's, which was exactly a mile away from the school. It was on the campus of the University of Louisville, and he would allow the students to get a treat once they finished the run. Trust me, the irony is not lost on me that we would run the mile and then immediately eat McDonald's afterwards, but we were like 14, had great metabolism, so who cares? So when Yared started at Manual, he had never ran competitively in his life and had zero intention of ever running track or cross country when he was in high school. He was in the Math, Science, and Technology magnet Manual, which is actually the same magnet that I was in, believe it or not. And it definitely had the reputation of being the nerdy magnet because some of the most intelligent kids you'll ever meet were in that magnet. I was not one of them. As a matter of fact, on my first day in the Math, Science, Technology magnet, I come in out of middle school, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm pretty smart. The first day of school was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. I was like, I am nowhere near as smart as these kids. A lot of them would end up going to Harvard, MIT, Yale. You get my point here. Again, I was way out of my league. And I think in that moment, I realized, maybe I want to get into like journalism and communications. Well, Yared was really smart. He did not have to deal with that. He eventually wanted to become an orthodontist. That's why he got into that magnet, so he could eventually go to dental school. And the only thing remotely athletic that he had done up to that point was join the bowling team. And all of his other extracurricular activities were aimed at rounding out his academic profile, making sure that he was a better candidate once he'd apply to colleges, doing stuff like science fair, things like that. Running was not on his radar. But when he ran the mile as a requirement, he was so much faster than literally everyone else that it was shocking. And look, some kids don't try at all when they run the mile, but Yared did because he wanted to be the first in line at McDonald's, and he beat everyone else by a lot. I don't even think he was in workout clothes either. I think he had like khaki shorts on, not the best shoes on, but still, he's just a natural. So he runs a mile, he runs it in a really impressive time. No one else is even close to him. So Coach Motley was so blown away, and he immediately went to Tim Holman, who was the track and cross country coach at Manual, and he was like, you've got to see this kid. Holman was my AP government and politics teacher in high school. He's great. And when him and Coach Motley approached Nuguse about joining the cross country team, Yared was pretty reluctant. He was like, no, that's not really my thing. I'm pretty focused on school right now. I'm already doing bowling. Like, I need to be focused on my academics so I could eventually become an orthodontist. But Motley and Holman were persistent, and eventually they got Yared to sign up for the cross-country team. Yared didn't know a thing about running when he started. He said that before that the only time he'd ever really race would be when he'd be racing his siblings around the house just to see who was faster, but he'd never run like a long distance or anything like that. And on the first day of cross-country practice, he was wondering where the track was, and Coach Holman was like, nope, cross-country is on grass. That same kid, who didn't even know what cross-country was or where he would be running, would go on to win 3 state championships in high school, and in his senior year, he broke the state record for the boys' fastest mile, running it in 4 minutes and 6 seconds. That record still stands in the state of Kentucky. Then he'd go on to earn a scholarship to run track at Notre Dame, and he'd win multiple NCAA championships, and he broke the American record, North American record, for the fastest mile time ever at 3 minutes and 43 seconds. He beat the old record by a full 3 seconds. Just incredible stuff. He's just a natural. Like, there's no other way to slice it. He said that he only did it as something like fun to do in high school, and then, as a way to earn a scholarship at Notre Dame. And the reason that he picked Notre Dame is because even though it offered a good opportunity for him to run competitively in college, he was really going for the academics as well. So his mind was still trained to be focused on academics, despite the fact that he was literally one of the best runners in the entire country coming out of high school. So clearly, he's a natural, God-given ability to run, but it wasn't always easy for him. He qualified for the Tokyo Olympics, but he ended up being unable to compete because he suffered a quad injury. So that was really disappointing. He thought his professional running days might be over, but he stuck with it, continued running professionally, and he qualified again for the Paris Olympics, and he just won the bronze medal. I've never met Yared personally, but everybody else that I know that knows Yared raves about him as a person. He is so easy to root for. If you look up his Wikipedia page, he says that one of his main hobbies is taking care of his tortoise. And I was just so happy to see him win a medal. He was plus 3,400 on FanDuel to win gold. So if he had won it, and he was close, like if you watch it, he's in 5th, and it looks like he's not going to have any chance to medal. And then down the stretch, man, he just dug down deep, turned it on, and he ran so hard. He got up to that little cluster there at the end, finished 3rd, almost finished in 2nd. Could have won maybe if it was like 10 meters longer. It was just an incredible race, an incredible way for him to, I don't even want to say cap off his running career, because there's still more that he could accomplish if he chooses to. But just want to give a huge, huge, huge congrats to him. Big congrats to the Goose. The Goose is loose. There aren't a ton of people who went from Manual High School in Louisville to Notre Dame. It's clearly the best of us. It looks like I got some work to do to get anywhere close to the level of accomplished as Yared Nuguse. And he is so fun to root for, and he is about as great of a representative as there could possibly be for 2 institutions that mean so much to me. So congrats to the Goose. That was awesome. That's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back here tomorrow morning. Right now, the plan is to do my defensive line preview for the upcoming season, which I'm really excited about because I believe it's by far the best unit on the team, so I'm excited to talk about them. But if we get any news about Deuce Knight, then obviously I'm going to pivot and talk about that instead. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. For your second listen, remember to check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with host Spencer McLaughlin. He does a great job covering the sport as a whole. I plan on joining him in the near future to talk about the Irish and how they compare to some of the other top teams in college football. Also, be sure to get your mailbag questions in if you want to be featured on Friday's episode. As always, you can drop them below in the YouTube comments or send them to me on Twitter at LockedOnIrish or on Instagram at LockedOnIrishPod. Remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow morning.